Hey everybody! Today we're going to be talking about the negative stain and the capsule stain that we're going to be doing in class. And again, when it comes to a negative stain, the negative stain is a type of simple stain or a stain that only utilizes one stain. And the main way that the negative stain works out is that it utilizes a negative chromophore or a dye, and its basic goal is basically to be repelled from the cells that we're trying to stain, and we're going to stain the background itself. So because of that, normally again, when we look at a negative stain down the microscope, we end up seeing kind of a dark background with lightly colored cells. Now, we are going to talk about the capsule stain again in this video as well, and the main reason for that is basically when you do a capsule stain, you do a negative stain plus a few more steps. So when it comes to the capsule stain, the capsule stain is simply a stain that looks for the presence of capsules. And capsules are these kind of slime coats that certain bacteria have around them, and it basically makes them a little bit more resistant to certain things. It can make it easier for them to stick to our mucous membranes, meaning it's easier for them to make us sick. And in some part, it can also help certain bacteria basically evade the immune system, and it makes it kind of hard for our immune cells to basically grab onto them because they're so slimy. So kind of with our introductions out of the way on the two types of stains that we're going to be talking about, let's talk about the different materials that you're going to need in order to perform these two stains. So for our negative stain, you're going to be needing your Bunsen burner and your striker to light it. You're going to need your loop in order to do your transfer. You're going to need some kind of sample, and this is going to be best from a plate to do this type of procedure. You're going to need a microscope slide, and then you will also need either a secondary microscope slide or a cover slip. We tend to prefer to use cover slips because cover slips are cheaper than microscope slides, and since we're going to be working with live bacteria for both of these stains, everything goes in the biohazard afterwards, so if we have to trash it anyways, might as well use the cheap stuff. You're also going to need, of course, your staining tray and or sink, again, depending on what kind of setup that we have. And then in terms of the dye that we're going to be using, I guess you will need a way to get a drop of water onto your slide. So again, I just have my little DI water bottle here. And then the stains that you can use for a negative stain is going to be either what we call nigrosin ink or Indian ink. And both of these stains, again, are these negatively charged stains to stain the background and not our cells themselves. So I happen to have nigrosin ink, so that's the one that I'm going to be using. Now, those are going to be all the different parts, again, that you're going to need for the negative stain. In order to then complete a capsule stain, you will need all the same parts plus some. And the big sort of plus some that you're going to be needing here is going to be crystal violet. And we'll kind of talk more about that again once we get into the capsule stain procedure. Now, depending on the way that you want to finish up the capsule stain, there are actually 3 different ways that I'll cover in this video. You might need a bottle of water or a bottle with DI water in it to do a rinse, and you might need either biblious paper or a paper towel in order to do a blot. We'll kind of talk about that again at the end of the capsule stain procedure. But kind of with that in mind, again, let's go through and let's talk about how we do a negative stain first, again, and then we'll kind of tailor it into the capsule stain afterwards. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put my slide in my staining area, and the first thing I'm going to do is that I'm just going to add a single drop of water onto my slide. So just a single drop of water. If you can, half a drop of water is fine as well. Again, if you can just kind of get a little bit out of the drop and then just tap it down to the slide, that works as well. And now I'm done with this guy. The next thing I'm going to do is that I'm going to aseptically, again, transfer my bacteria into that drop of water. So let me get my Bunsen burner going. Here we go. I'm going to flame my loop. Then I'm going to take my sample, and again, I'm going to try to do this aseptically, so we're going to use all of our aseptic rules that we have. So open up the lid, tap it somewhere where there's no growth in order to cool down the loop. Grab just a tiny little bit of your sample, just a tiny little bit. Close the lid. And then now what I'm going to do is that I want to just add my bacteria to the water. I don't want to smear it. I just want to add it to the water. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap it into the water nice and gently. And by doing that, hopefully it should turn this kind of milky white, just like in this picture here. And we're kind of looking again for that cloudy, milky look. And once we've done that, there should be enough bacteria in there. I'm going to go ahead and flame my loop in order to clean it. And then we can get this Bunsen burner turned off. All right. So now that my sample again is inside of that water, again, just very gently tapped it. I want to try not to break that water too much, and I definitely don't want to smear it. The next step now is to take my nigrosin ink, and I'm just going to add a single drop of nigrosin ink next to the water. And it's a little bit difficult to see in the video, but again, they do kind of smear together. And basically what I'm doing is that with that water on there, I'm somewhat diluting the black color of my nigrosin ink. And by doing that, rather than just seeing a completely black slide under the microscope, I'll get this kind of purpley look instead. So the next step is now to take my cover slip, and I'm kind of going to hold it at a 45-degree angle, and I'm basically just going to drag it across my slide in order to mix my sample and that nigrosin ink together. So I'm just gently dragging it across the slide to mix my water and my stain, and that's basically it. And what I have to do now is that now I need to wait for my negative stain to air dry. And this part can take quite a while. It might take again like 5-10 minutes for that to actually happen. It kind of depends on how much water you have on there, and it also depends on, again, just kind of how much stain you got on there. If you have a lot of excess nigrosin ink, a trick that you can use, let me take a piece of this real fast. If you have a paper towel again, or you have biblious paper, what you can do if you want to get some of this excess stain off of there is that you can basically take with your cover slip and you can kind of push it off the edge of the slide onto the biblious paper. And by doing that, I'm kind of soaking up some of that excess fluid that I have. And by doing that, I'm going to reduce my wait time. Now, with some of the other stains, we did talk about how in order to make our little smears, again, dry faster, we can put them in the incubator. We cannot do that with a negative stain, and definitely cannot do that with a capsule stain. If we actually do it with a capsule stain, it shrinks the capsules, and all of our positive results will now look negative. So there really isn't any way to make this one go faster. You just have to let it sit at your table and air dry. Can't make it go any quicker. But I'm going to speed up this process a little bit, so I'm going to take this guy, and I'm going to move him over here, and I'm going to take one that I've made beforehand, and this is basically what we're looking for at the end, is what one of these are going to be looking like. Try to find a good spot to kind of show that. So again, it should just kind of look like this sort of faintly colored kind of black slide, or if you had a lot of stain on there, it might be a bit more darkly colored. Either way though, these are perfectly fine in terms of a negative stain, and at this point we would now be able to look at these under ordered immersion to look again for things like morphology or different types of arrangements that we might see for specific microbes. But kind of with that in mind again, that's basically the negative stain. So again, add your drop of water, put your sample in it, nigrosin ink, smear it across, wait for it to dry, and now you've done a negative stain. So with that in mind, let's basically add the steps on how to then convert this into a capsule stain. And the procedure here is pretty straightforward as well. The next thing that we're going to do is basically just take, once this has dried, if I want to make it into a capsule stain, I'm going to take my crystal violet and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to flood the slide for 1 minute. So I'm just going to take some crystal violet, put it all over my slide. There we go. Now I wait 1 minute while my stain is basically soaking into the cells. So I kind of mentioned again in the beginning of the talk here that there are 3 basic ways that you can actually finish up this procedure. And when it comes to this part here, after your 60 seconds are up, again, you have 3 ways to basically finish it. Option number 1, take your slide and tilt it, kind of shake off the excess stain, and then let it air dry. That's going to work out perfectly fine. When you do that, you do get quite a bit of stain on there, and you might end up with something that kind of looks like this. Kind of has a lot of stain on there, looks kind of thick. The other option that you can do is basically, again, wait your 60 seconds, pick up the slide, shake off a little bit of that excess stain, and then either using Biblios paper or a paper towel, blot it dry real fast. And when you do that, again, you're going to get some of that excess stain off of there. But what can sometimes happen is that just kind of like in this one here, there's a lot of it on the back as well. It did get quite a bit of stain on the back, so you can have quite a bit of background noise when you do that. But your capsules are still going to show up just fine under the microscope. Now the last option that you have is then basically to kind of pick it up, shake it off a little bit, and then you're going to give it a gentle rinse and then blot it. And when I say a gentle rinse, that's kind of the procedure I want to show, because anytime we rinse something that hasn't been heat fixed, there's a chance that we can rinse it off. So again, when I'm saying that we're going to give this kind of a gentle rinse, I mean, again, just kind of pick it up, shake it off a little bit. Also, crystal violet is notorious for staining everywhere, so be careful with that. But again, I'm just going to gently rinse from the top. Just gently rinse from the top and give it a little bit of a chance to get some of that excess stain off. Come down to the bottom, kind of get some of the extra off, and then kind of rinse off of the back. Maybe give it a little more on the top here, a little bit on the bottom, another run on the back there, and then that's basically all that I'm going to do. Again, just kind of that nice gentle rinse. Get your paper towel out, your Biblios paper, whatever you might have. Give it a little bit of a blot, and again, there we go. So again, with this one here, there's not going to be nearly as much stain on there as in some of those other ones, but again, the trade-off is you might potentially wash off your sample. But all around, the way that the capsule stain actually works out again is that when we did the negative stain, we basically stained the background, giving us these nicely light colored cells to look at. But when we then use the crystal violet doesn't actually stain the capsules, it only stains the cells inside of the capsules. So what ends up happening is that the nigrosinate makes a nice black background for us to look at, and then we get these clear halos around our purple cells. And that's basically what would indicate a positive result for a capsule stain. Is again, if you get these little cells with these halos around them. If you just see cells that are just stained all the way, then that's going to be a negative result for our capsule stain. Now, when it comes to the negative stain and the capsule stain, while the stains themselves are kind of finicky and they can be a little bit difficult to do and make sure that they come out looking right, finding the stuff under the microscope and actually figuring out what you're looking at is even more difficult. So what I'm going to do is that I am going to make a secondary video that basically explains how to navigate negative and capsule stains so that you can actually look at how to actually find the different things under the microscope, and so we can also look at exactly what a positive and negative would look like for this capsule stain. But with that in mind, I don't think I have anything else to introduce on our negative stain and our capsule stain.